at you all the way live from Oakland, California. This is Revolution Podcast, and this is our patrons only. We're actually going to share this with the public. This is our patrons only Glen Ford Memorial episode. If you are a patron of the show, we just started doing a patrons only segment that people were kind of asking for, like an Ask Pascal. And I'll be honest, Pascal was a bit hesitant on a straight up Ask Pascal segment. And we were going to do it with the phones, and the phone system we're rethinking. It's coming back when I get back from vacation. I was just trying to test it out if it could work. It works. It's a little bit of a hassle doing it the way we're doing it, so we're going to upgrade that system when I get back from the break. Anyway, so, we leave the comments on the screen since it's patron only, and you can basically talk with Pascal, and I wouldn't say answer all your questions, because he's long-winded, right? So he'll have a central theme, and we can have a bit of a group discussion. And we changed it from Ask Pascal to the Mau Mau Hour with Pascal Robert. And just recently, the left had a great loss. Glen Ford, the editor of Black Agenda Report, one of the founding editors of Black Agenda Report, passed away. So I believe the two founders were Bruce Dixon and Glen Ford, and both of these gentlemen are gone now. So Pascal wanted to say something. I actually approached him to say, we can nix this all together, and I think people would understand. You wrote for Black Agenda Report for the better part of 10 years. And Pascal had commented that he knew Glen Ford was sick and didn't sound all that well when he talked to him last. And we had conversations about, Glenn and Bruce Dixon and their influence on him and the political education these brothers gave him, and the political education that I get from him in turn. So this was a show that Pascal was, pretty much paying his respects live time to Glenn and again to Bruce. He never really got a chance to say something publicly on air about Bruce's influence as well. And me personally, I was a little upset that I felt like his passing really only resonated in these colored corners of the left. And for a man that's been a part of left media for the majority of his adult life, a force, if you will, it's heartbreaking that nobody wanted to eulogize the man on air. I mean, there was a few people. I'm not going to say there wasn't, but it wasn't to the level that I thought it would be. But all that being said, this is our episode, the Mau Mau Hour with Pascal Robert. It was a bit of a somber show, but we tried to end on a little bit of a good note. If you want to be a part of the Mau Mau Hour with Pascal Robert, there's one way to do it. Become a patron. Patreon.com/Bitter Lake Presents. Wherever you're listening to this show, there is a link in the description of the show to the Patreon. We do the Mau Mau Hour with Pascal Robert once a month. It's a fun show. This one, I wouldn't say the word fun. It was a bit of a somber tone. Also, if you want to watch the show live time, be a part of the conversation. YouTube is the best way. YouTube.com/This is Revolution Podcast. Every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time. Every Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time. And also when I come back from my break, we are going to add a day. And that day right now looks like it's going to be a very, very good day. I feel like Donald Trump. It's going to be a good day. Great day. No, I'm not going to name names yet. I've got two confirmations of people that are down for the Wednesday day. I need one more, and then we'll start talking about it probably around August. We'll start talking about getting you guys ready for what Wednesday is going to be, but I'm pretty stoked for adding this extra day. Maybe we'll even add an extra audio-only podcast, since we'll be looking at 4 days. That being said, thank you guys so much for your support. Thank you for listening. At the end of this show, I have an episode, I think it was Glen Ford's last episode, on Chris Hedges' On Contact that comes on RT, Russia Today. And they're talking about the legacy of Obama, his neoliberal legacy. And the Black Agenda Report crew were kind of the only people talking about that back in 2008. Before 2008. So that's my cue. Thank you guys again. I hope you enjoy this. Pascal Robert's memorial to a true giant on the left, Glen Ford. Peace.
Greetings to the chat. Greetings to all that are here today. Welcome to what is normally supposed to be the Mau Mau Hour with Pascal Robert, but today is going to be far from a Mau Mau Hour. Today we're going to talk about someone who is a friend, comrade, teacher, had a significant influence on my life and many people on the left. If you all did not hear the news that the chief editor and publisher of Black Agenda Report, Glen Ford, passed away earlier today, this morning, as a matter of fact. Glen had been suffering from He was actually getting dialysis for diabetes, as well as was suffering from lung cancer, and he passed away today. And for me, as someone who had been writing for Black Agenda Report for several years, I think the first piece I published then was even somewhere before 2010. I knew both Bruce Dixon and Glen Ford very well. I used to, every time I submitted a piece for publication, I would speak to Glen Ford, who was very hands-on in terms of his role as editor of the publication. And today, I think that for those of us who were regular admirers of Black Agenda Report and the various appearances that Glen Ford had been on throughout media, particularly on the left, that I'd like us to take this opportunity to really kind of commemorate the brother and comrade and really talk about some of the high points of his life and the influence that he had on various individuals. So what I'm going to do initially is I'm just going to kind of someone actually the first time I actually physically met Bruce Dixon was at Glen Ford. I'm sorry, I'm confusing it. The first time I actually physically met Glen Ford was after I had already been writing for Black Agenda Report for a few years. Was at the Left Forum in 2013. I flew up to New York to do a presentation, and I think it was a presentation on Haiti, as a matter of fact. Yeah, there definitely was a presentation on Haiti, and I appeared there also with the Black Agenda Report crew, and we had dinner, we went to a bar and a restaurant, we talked, we hung out, and we spent a great deal of time together. Bruce Dixon was there, Glen Ford was there, Margaret Kimberly, Nellie Bailey, also another person affiliated with Black Agenda Report. And, we were just talking politics and telling stories, and it was actually just kind of amazing. We were talking about the politics of the day, and it was definitely a feeling of camaraderie, of friendship, and it was a great time. And the second time that I got a chance to meet Glen was at I believe the 7th anniversary of a Black Agenda Report, which I think was 2015. I don't remember the exact year. I had also flown up to New York for that. I'm originally from New York, so I flew up particularly for that. And we had kind of a dinner. There was a banquet that we had. I think it was at a church in Harlem at the time. We had a few speakers, and then we went out to a bar and restaurant again and talked politics as well. Someone asked what part of New York I'm from. I'm originally from New York City, from Queens, Jamaica, Queens. So what I wanted to do before I get into my personal ruminations on Glen Ford is just kind of read a kind of brief background on him that actually was published by Janice Graham at Black Agenda Report about Glen, just to give you some background. Executive editor Glen Ford, certified elder of the Black Journalism Triad, historic firsts, most, and onlys in the hallmarks of Glen Ford's long career. The son of famed disc jockey Rudy the Deuce Rutherford, the first Black man to host a non-gospel television show in the Deep South, Columbus, Georgia in 1958, Glen was reading news copy on the air at age 11 with his dad. Glen's first full-time broadcast news jobs was at James Brown's Augusta, Georgia radio station, WRDW, in 1970, where the Godfather of Soul shortened Glen's surname to Ford. Glen Ford worked as a newsperson at 4 more local stations in Columbus, Georgia, Atlanta, Baltimore, where he created his first radio syndication, a half-hour weekly news magazine called Black World Report. in Washington, D.C. In 1974, joined the Mutual Black Network, 88 radio stations, where he served as Capitol Hill, State Department, and White House correspondent and Washington bureau chief, while also producing a daily radio commentary. In 1977, Ford co-launched, produced, and hosted America's Black Forum, the first nationally syndicated Black news interview program on commercial television. America's Black Forum made broadcast history for the next 4 years. The program generated national and international headlines nearly every week. Never before and never since had a Black news entity commanded the weekly attention of other news services like AP, UPI, Reuters, Agence France-Presse, even TASS, the Soviet news agency, and other broadcast networks. While still host and co-owner of America's Black Forum, Ford in 1979 created Black Agenda Reports, which provided 5 programs each day on Black women. That was not the current Black Agenda Report. History, business, sports, entertainment to 66 radio stations. The syndication produced more short-form programming than 2 existing Black radio networks combined. Ford also produced McDonald's-sponsored radio series Black History Through Music, aired on 50 stations nationwide. In 1987, Ford launched Wrap It Up, the first nationally syndicated hip-hop music show, broadcast on 65 radio stations. During its 6-year operations, Wrap It Up allowed Ford to play an important role in the maturation of the new African-American music genre. He organized 3 national rap music conventions and wrote the hip-hop column for Jack the Rapper's Black Radio Trade magazine. Ford co-founded Black Commentator in 2002. The weekly journal became the most influential Black political site on the net. In October 2006, Ford and the entire writing team left Black Commentator to launch a Black Agenda Report. And in addition to his broadcast and internet experience, Glen Ford was a national political columnist to Encore American Worldwide News Magazine, founded the Black Commentator and the Africana Policy magazines, and authored The Big Lie, an analysis of U.S. media coverage of the Grenada invasion in 1985, voiced over 1,000 radio commercials, half of which he also produced, and scores of television commercials, and served as a reporter and editor for 3 newspapers and two dailies and 1 weekly. Ford was a founding member of the Washington chapter of the National Association of Black Journalists, executive board member of the National Alliance of Third World Journalists, and media specialist for the National Minority Purchasing Council, and has spoken at scores of colleges and universities. So that was the background of Glen Ford in terms of his journalism career. Many people who just knew Glen in terms of his work at Black Agenda Report, but were not aware of the fact that he had a long, storied career in journalism, going back to his father, who was his father actually was in the Black Radio Host Hall of Fame in Atlanta, Georgia. So Glen definitely comes from a long history of Black media and stellar Black media appearances from television to radio. America's Black Forum, for those who may not remember, was one of the early Black Affairs television programs. It was very popular. I remember watching it as well. Glen was also a member of the Newark, New Jersey member of the Black Panther Party, so he was also came out of the radical movement of the 60s also. My interaction with Glen Ford really started in 2008 and 2009 with the beginnings of the Obama presidency. And how I even became aware of Glen was that there was a speech that he had made that to this day, I can't find the speech in which he was talking about what Barack Obama meant for Black people and Black politics. And I got an opportunity to watch this. And before that, I had been actually writing on my own personal blog for a couple of years. I started writing on my blog in 2007. And I was kind of ambivalent to the whole Obama presidential enterprise overall, because, I expected him to be nothing but really kind of a remake of Bill Clinton in blackface, if you will. But in this presentation, watching Glen Ford, he so adeptly made clear to the audience the real political challenge that the Obama presidency was going to bring forth to Black America. And he did it with such a sense of foreboding and a warning of what this was to mean in terms of the future of Black politics, as if to say, is like, you need to be aware, we need to be on guard. And many people today who talk about how, there are some people who are still affectionate for, still kind of deluded into their, sympathies for the Obama presidential project, don't realize how controversial it was in 2007, 2008, 2009 to be coming out publicly and telling Black audiences that this guy Barack Obama was not the hero that he was being deemed to large segments of Black audiences. And as I watched this presentation, I was taken aback by the clarity of the analysis that Glen made in this video I was watching, because he really explained how the Obama presidency particularly represented a kind of existential threat to everything that Black politics had been up until that point in American history, and how the Obama presidency should actually be viewed as such. And one of the first things that I did immediately was I reached out, I emailed him and Bruce Dixon, and we started talking, and I started to get very close to particularly to Bruce Dixon and reading Black Agenda Report. I had already had a piece published in the Black Commentator, which is a publication that they had originally founded, Glen Ford had originally founded in 2002. And that's when I really started to become close to both of them and get my regular dosage of political education from both Glen Ford and Bruce Dixon, not only in reading Black Agenda Report, more so talking to Bruce Dixon, but to talking to Glen as well. And one of the things that, most people who know Glen, they'd always talk about his voice. The guy had like the perfect radio, like television voice, like the kind of announcer voice that you would expect. Now, our sponsors, he had this really kind of deep kind of baritone about his voice. And I remember vividly looking forward to hearing his audio commentary on Black Agenda Radio and watching his various speeches and presentations on YouTube about various political events. And one of the things that it occurred to me is that, Glen Ford came out of a particular Black radical tradition that challenged, American capitalism, American empire. But what was specifically interesting to me is that how very early on, Black Agenda Report and Glen were very prescient about the way in which the Obama presidency was fulfilling, some of the more egregious exploits of American empire, and that his analysis was right on point. And what you would find is that there were, to this day, I meet, dozens of people who tell me that their first kind of analysis of what the Obama presidency represented and what that presidency's agenda was about came from reading Black Agenda Report. And I started writing for the publication. I started writing on issues of Haiti and Black politics, as well as I had been writing for my own personal blog. And, I regularly started having conversations with Bruce and Glen, 2-3 times, sometimes with Glen 2-3 times a month, with Bruce twice a week, every week. And it was, in conversations I would have with Glen, it was always amazing to hear how extensive his political memory was and how well he understood the political history of Black America and how he understood the political history of the left. Glenn was a red diaper baby. Both his parents had been in the Communist Party in the earlier part of the 20th century, and I believe that's how they met. And he had an encyclopedic understanding of left history, Black left history, and left history overall. And the clarity in which he was able to just assess various political phenomenon and the range of influence that the publication had in terms of Black political commentary was broad. And one of the things that for me is so important in this contemporary age that Black Agenda Report did under Glenn and Bruce Dixon at that time is that they were really at the vanguard in analyzing and critiquing the role of the Black political class, which Glen Ford came up with the term Black misleadership class, which is a term that he created to describe the Black political class, the civil rights establishment, the Congressional Black Caucus. And they were very, very direct and blunt in challenging the way in this particular moment in the 50-year counter-revolution, how Black politics had become a politics of serving the needs of the Black political class as opposed to serving the needs of Black constituents. So, they would get, it's hard for people to understand this now, but they would get massive pushback from a lot of people in the Black chattering class, a lot of liberals, a lot of Black folk did not like to hear about their critiques about the Obama presidency, but they were resilient and they continued. And for me, one of the most important aspects of what Glenn and Black Agenda Report had been able to do from 2006 is that they created a language and a discourse of analyzing Black political activity for people who were not familiar with Black left critique to understand how exactly the Black political class was falling short in terms of them being good stewards of the political fortunes of their Black constituents. And it was something that it wasn't new to me because I had heard similar context in a kind of foreign kind of about Haitian politics from people in my own family, like my uncles. But to hear that in the African American continuum was something that was very, very shocking and strident for a lot of people. And to talk about the role in which political officials had in terms of fulfilling these kind of ruling class agendas that did not serve their constituencies effectively was a very important contribution that I feel became more and more popularized, particularly with the rise of the Sanders phenomenon and the rise of the new left, this democratic socialists and so on and so forth, who started to look at those kind of criticisms and incorporate them into their own criticisms of neoliberalism. I mean, Black Agenda Report was talking about the use of kind of neoliberal identity politics before there was the Sanders left. I mean, this is something, of course, that writers like Adolph Reed had been talking about for a while. But these guys were really doing it on a regular weekly basis, explaining how this model of black faces in high places really did not translate into a politics that was changing the material conditions of life for black people. So one of the things that I think that made Glen's contribution to contemporary American political discourse so valuable, particularly on the left, is that as a black publication, he and Black Agenda Reported created the linguistic framing and the record to show that there were black people who had a very strident criticism and challenge to their own political establishments, and were willing to call out the kind of duplicitous way in which those black political elites in the age of neoliberalism were helping facilitate that kind of neoliberal agenda more effectively. And that is something that I think that contribution is immense, when large segments of the black chattering class in the black media establishment was doing nothing but simply applauding and cheering along with the agenda of that kind of neoliberal black politics. So I can remember when there were very few spaces where you would see a regular strident criticism of the neoliberal turn in black politics. One of the pieces that Glen wrote that I think is as probably one of his most important pieces was a piece that he wrote the first time that Cory Booker ran for mayor of Newark, New Jersey. And in the piece, he basically talks about how... You remember that piece, Jason?
I remember that piece. I was gonna say, I was listening to you, and I definitely remember Glen Ford being the first person I read that called out Barack Obama. I'm not going to sit here and say I read Adolph Reed in 1995. I did not.
Right. But what's interesting is that in that piece, when he's talking about Cory Booker, he discusses how there are all these corporate forces that are becoming interested in financing black politics, and that basically that there is a shift going on in black politics starting in the Clinton era, in which all of these resources are being poured in that begin this this is the piece right here, this process of neoliberalization of black politics. And what is important about the piece is that it really illustrates how the birth of the kind of neoliberal model of the Barack Obama, Adrian Fenty, Cory Booker, Harold Ford Jr., Artur Davis, this kind of petri dish model of the new black, Ivy League educated, slick, corporate friendly politician was being intentionally manufactured with and being provided with deep pocket resources to capture black politics in a direction that frankly would have served the interest of capital. And what's fascinating is that how prescient he was in making that analysis at such an early stage, because we see how this becomes the trend in black politics as well. So, it's really, really important for me to give Glen and Black Agenda Report, a publication that I've written for more than any other publication, the credit they deserve for being able to kind of forecast the trajectory upon which Black politics was really being usurped at a high level and being taken into, in which we see now when we have the kind of, the neoliberal model of Black politics that has become somewhat of the norm. But also, and I give Glen Ford and Black Agenda Report credit for this, is that the criticism that is so normalized that we see on the left now between people like the kind of new DSA type Sanders left, or even in left media, around people like Clyburn, around people who are traditional kind of tools of the corporate Democrat establishment in the Black political class, that we're now beginning to see. These are things that have been going on in Black Agenda Report. I think Jason can attest to that. This was a regular thing for years. And even some of the language like the Black mixed leadership class and all of that starts to become more prevalent in left spaces. So I think that for those of us who have politics that try to really, really analyze these phenomenon, besides the simple kind of like identity, kind of like, oh, they're Black elected officials and we can't criticize them, who are trying to get a really kind of hardcore critique, Black Agenda Report was crucial, and Glen Ford particularly, in bringing forth that analysis and bringing forth that challenge, that challenge to that really kind of stale politics. And also, we cannot forget the foreign policy coverage in terms of during the war on terror, the war in Iraq, the challenging the drone strikes, the Africa policy. I mean, one of the first places that I saw anyone talking about AFRICOM, talking about the militarization of the African continent. I mean, one of the few places where I saw really strident critiques of African affairs was Black Agenda Report early on, in the comprehensive nature. And I mean, we can, talk, we can't act like everyone gets everything right. But I mean, this is a time where everyone was just kind of like go along and get along with the Obama model, and no one was really challenging these things. So for me, not only as someone who became a writer and contributor to Black Agenda Report, but someone who was a regular reader and a student of particularly these two men, and even Margaret as well, the political education that they offered on a variety of subjects, not only in terms of Black political history, on current affairs, on foreign policy, even on some pop culture as well, was just just immense. And I don't think that we've had another publication like that on the left, or anywhere, left, right, or otherwise, in that way, to the extent that Black Agenda Report was able to do that. I mean, it's so funny. I've been Jason and I, we were talking about how we've been doing this for 6 or 7 months, going on 20 years. This is Revolution podcast, and I shared a piece that I wrote in 2013 in Black Agenda Report with Jason, a piece about Kanye West and pop culture. And then it's funny, Jason, who didn't know me then, he was like, "Man, I read this when this came out."
But what's interesting about Black Agenda Report, and in your affiliation with Black Agenda Report, and this, as the show is growing at the rate it's growing at, there's a lot of people that are new to the show. But for those of you that are watching right now that have been around from the early days when it was just me in a room in the studio, when you hear people like Dylan Rodriguez come on the show and be like, dude, bars on my when I turn on my computer, so the first things I read, I've had Margaret on the show. Danny Haifong was on the show back when I first started. Margaret was on pretty much one of the first, I think, 20 interviews that I did on this show. So those early articles for me were almost taboo to the point of like when I would go like sneak and listen to Richard Pryor records.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. It's like one of the things that I always said about Black Agenda Report is that Black Agenda Report is everyone's favorite website that no one likes to admit that they read. It's like, it's like the website that everyone would read, but no one would want to say publicly. It's like, I had friends of mine who was like, yeah, I read Black Agenda Report. I was like, well, why are you whispering about that? It's like it was so like when you talk about that time, I think, because so many people, when you bring up the Bernie Sanders left, we have to remember that this is a pretty new phenomenon. And there was an 8-year period that people kind of walked through a bit of a fog through the Obama years, or people were just really too small to really understand what the Bush Jr. years were like post 9/11. Like there were very few, the Sam Cedars of the world were radical, because they were calling for impeachment of the war criminal president. And for the most part, a lot of people just shrugged their shoulders. What's really fascinating, Jason, is that when we talk about that, is that doesn't that really emphasize how absolutely new this thing called the left is in America? We hear people all the time talking like, oh, like the left. I was like, do you guys understand? Like, I can remember like 10 years ago, this was a handful of people that were talking like this. Yeah. There were like there were like 2 or 3 publications that were writing on these issues, and that's why when I see some of these, kind of like, the online left media folk or the sock them tights acting like, oh, we're the vanguard. I was like, yeah, bro, what are you talking about the vanguard? Man, people were out here talking about this stuff like when you were still caping for like, the neoliberal black president and all that jazz, man. Which this would, probably piss Glenn and the rest of the bar crew off, but I think I sent a picture to you late last night in a text message or our Facebook chat that Michael B. Jordan is trying to push for a series to be made on the black neoliberal Superman. Did you see that? I thought it wasn't Ta-Nehisi Coates working on that project. Ta-Nehisi Coates writes it. He writes it. So they literally want to have like a neoliberal Superman black president kind of shtick. Blue eyes. Don't forget he's got blue eyes. He's got blue eyes. Oh, that's amazing. That's fascinating. The south side of Krypton, apparently. The south side of Krypton. He was gentrified out of his planet before it blew up, and that's how he became. I made that up, but he is Black Superman, and he is the 45th president. And Michael B. Jordan is pushing for that to be made as a series. He'll probably get it done. Well, that's something to look forward to. Not at all. The Marxist left in North America was confined to a few big cities and the faculties of some humanities departments. Yeah, I mean, I'm from the Bay Area. Pascal is from New York. So, of course, we are connected to the left almost through birthright, being where we're from. That being said, the online blow up of the left post Bernie Sanders and with the rise of Trump has been an interesting thing to watch, because again, people like Black Agenda Report, especially people like Glen Ford, Adolf. I'll throw someone like Cornel West in there. I know Pascal may not agree. No, I wouldn't. I'm not. Cornel has been definitely a voice on the left going back to, a while. Definitely during the Obama years. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's true. And
to be speaking out at a time when no one said anything bad about Obama, because all of this hate was coming on Obama from the right. That was just silly. Kind of like AOC, but with AOC, I don't get it and I don't get involved in it because I'm like, she's a second-term congresswoman that can't do shit. The Obama hate was always silly shit, like the tan suit. And at the time during that administration, I was living with a family that watched Fox News, so I remember the terrorist fist bump was 24 hours on Fox News.
Right. You know, it's fascinating, right? Is that how that was all used to obfuscate from really, really serious critiques about how, like, Obama's, you know, race to the top educational program had cost tens of thousands of Black and brown and Latino teachers to lose their jobs, or how, you know, Obama was droning, you know, the living life out of the Middle East.
Well, let's just talk about the race to the top. A few weeks ago, you sent me this article, or was a post? I can't remember what it was, but something that pissed me off. I mean, you weren't trying to piss me off. It was about somebody hating on California. And one thing they didn't talk about is kind of the decimation of school systems with that race to the top. And that movie, that horrible movie that comes out right at the beginning of the Obama administration, Waiting for Superman, critically acclaimed. If I'm not mistaken, I think it had some Bill Gates money behind it. And the main focus of the movie is that tenured teachers and teachers unions were the problem. And what we need is school vouchers, get rid of unions, and then you'll get better teachers because the free market will provide. It really hurt schools. Detroit, you know, look at Michigan, and that's also where Betsy DeVos comes out of. And again, people like Ford and Black Agenda Report were kind of the only voices that were pushing back against this narrative, the narrative that was very prevalent, because there was no left media space like we have today with the internet and the small handful of shows that you might want to call left. I mean, this is back in the day where Bill Maher was considered a leftist just because he was anti-war.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, people act like that was so long ago. That's like yesterday to me, man.
It's not that long ago.
You know, it really, you know, I know we talk about this whole like 50-year counter revolution here on our show a lot, but again, understand how steeped in like capitalist imperialist realism this country was up until, like, you know, 5, 6, 8, 9 years ago, 10 years ago. You know, there was no real serious, rigorous left critique of this discourse. And now we have people out here talking about, oh, I'm a Marxist-Leninist, or I'm a Trot, I'm a this and that. I'm like, yo, this y'all are just new to these streets out here. Yeah. And, you know, as much as I'm talking like, you know, I was on some kind of vanguard here, people like Glenn and Bruce who come out, and even Adolf and even, you know, Janice Graham, who come out of the 60s, who come out of the Panthers, who come out of, you know, the new left of that era, who stayed loyal to that politics. Can you imagine those folks, you know, dealing with the rise of Reaganism, the rise of Clintonism? You know,
that's why talking to like Norm Finkelstein, and for those of you, I'm sure you guys have seen the Finkelstein show. I mean, off-air conversations with them. They're interesting conversations. You're talking to a man, like you said, that's been through it from the beginning, and he's been an outcast this entire time. And as he gets excited about things that maybe you and I don't even get that excited about, he actually does get mildly excited about things like Black Lives Matter. But he's hurt also, too, because he's like, damn, you guys are nothing like we were. Like, he doesn't see it as even as radical as it was for him in the 60s and 70s, and even to some degree the early 80s.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I look back to the show we had with Duruba with Ben Wahad, and he was talking about, when we were talking about, like, the revolutionary capacity of Black America. He was like, man, I mean, he was not very enthusiastic in terms of, things were, things we're looking at in terms of the contemporary generation. And he was talking about the role of, digitalization and hashtags and everything else, and kind of obscuring the ability of people to just meet physically in physical spaces to discuss politics and the things of the world, and how hard that was. So, I mean,
like think about where we are. 2002, Glen Ford is telling us the truth about Cory Booker, right? Who, I don't know why his likability isn't there. It's just not there for whatever reason. But still, he's a player in Washington. May not be the president, but he's still a player in Washington. And if he does the Joe Biden shtick, if you hang around long enough, you can fuck around and get in office. Before just telling us about Cory Booker, I'm reading half-ass articles about just falsehoods. I think I showed one to you. I'm not going to get into who it was, but saying that the Obama administration was a failure of boomer Black America.
That's factually incorrect. I mean, boomer Black America was supporting Hillary. It was the millennial Black America that was really behind Obama.
Yeah. And that doesn't take a lot of research to find that out. But the fact that this is kind of where we are with journalism is a sad day. It's a sad day on a lot of different levels. It's a sad day. I hope that Black Agenda Report can keep going. I don't know that
we needed to. I mean, I got to find out the logistics with Margaret, who, this is not the time right now to talk about that, because, everyone's still probably in shock at this loss. But that voice is still needed in this political moment right now. We're I've been thinking about this for the last couple of days, man. We're still in a political crossroads in this country right now in terms of where we are, where we go, where we're going, between this kind of new Trumpist manifestation of the right, and whether or not, this thing called the left is serious about a working class politics. And it's an unsettling time to me, frankly, in terms of where things are right now. And
I had to watch a lot of right-wing propaganda for the video today. I just want you to know that.
I know. You were talking to me about that for the show we're doing tomorrow about the postmodern right.
And I found a lot of Black right-wing, right adjacent. What do we call it? Postmodern conservatism. There's a lot of that. There's a lot.
Absolutely. So, but I mean, if it's any consolation, I'll be very honest with you, man. Doing this show with Jason gives me definitely gives me hope. The reaction that you guys have given us at This Is Revolution to our work, the consistent growth of the audience, and just being able to have a platform to talk with friends and comrades and critically engage what's going on in the world has been definitely valuable for me. And it's important. It's important. And I don't, for all of you, Jason is always like, oh man, people want to hear what you have to say, brother, blah. I'm like, really? Why? And, he's like, it's like, no, people. And I just want to let you guys know that, part of what makes me be able to give the kind of analysis that I have, or have the kind of politics that I have, is for over 10 years engaging with and getting political education from people like Glen Ford and Bruce Dixon, Of course, my uncles, my radical uncles had a lot to do with that in my early years. But Bruce and Glenn, Black Agenda Report, even Margaret, people like Adolph Reed, people like Gerald Horn, but definitely Bruce and Glenn, and engaging with them and talking to them, and getting that kind of regular kind of analysis of political phenomenon and reality was really, crucial in terms of allowing me to view things in the way I do and look at the world in the way I do. So for those of you who do appreciate what I contribute in my writing or what I contribute to this show, and I thank you for your appreciation, that really comes from having those elders and those brothers and the sister like Margaret really kind of iron sharpens iron, to be able to help in clarifying that politics and being able to translate that into a show like This is Revolution, where we can actually host some voices like that, like a Jamu Baraka, like Margaret, like Druba bin Wahab, like folks from Black Power Media, but particularly for me, the folks who come from that era as well, like Jaruba and whatnot, is valuable. It's important, and I cherish those voices. I cherish their presence, and I think that they bring forth a certain kind of clarity and a certain kind of no nonsense. And a lot of people are asking, you're really close with Janice Graham, and Janice is like an aunt to me. I have profound. I talked to her today about Glen Ford's passing. I have profound affection for her because she's such an intellectual role and cultural and social Rolodex of thought and ideas and conversations that she's had with people, and I value those folks. I know that there's this kind of new thing where people are like, okay, boomer, and I'm like, some of the best political education I've gotten in left politics were from boomers, people who lived during the new left, people who were there during that time. I know, some boomers are, questionable. They take that neoliberal turn and whatnot, but there are those out there who stayed dedicated to that politics. And Glen Ford Presente, he was one of them, and his contribution. I'm glad that while Glen Ford was alive, at least on 2 or 3 occasions, I thanked him for his dedication to the movement. I think, as a matter of fact, I called on the last Father's Day that we just passed. I called Glen on Father's Day, and I wanted to thank him. He had a daughter. I wanted to wish him a happy Father's Day, and I actually wanted to let him know how valuable his contribution had been, and I did that. And I remember there was another time where I think it was like the 50th anniversary of the Black Panther Party, and I remember calling him and telling him and thanking him for his contributions and his dedication to the movement, and he was very thankful as well. So give people their flowers. I know everyone uses this as not give people their flowers while they're alive. It's kind of corny, but don't be afraid to thank the people who are really shaping your worldview and helping you work through these things. We're all trying to work through these things and try to develop some clarity in terms of what's going on. Show them your appreciation, because I'll tell you something, Jason and I think will attest to this. Sometimes it feels kind of lonely being one of those voices that is challenging what's going on. You get a lot of hate. You get a lot of people who really are trying, like, what's wrong? Why don't you see everything like everyone else? And it's not all not oftentimes you start to wonder, is like, do people understand or see what's going on? So for those of you who appreciate folks like Glen Ford, Black Agenda Report, or other publications, or online left publications, Jason, myself, Gene, Kuba, the rest of the crew here, keep supporting and spread the word, and show positive support to those comrades that are helping your iron stay sharpened. And because it's valuable, because there are not a lot of us out there in the greater scheme. And let's show some kindness and appreciation to each other.
And I will say this. I'm a beneficiary of Pascal being around those people, because I definitely pick his brain, and he is not afraid to cite his sources when he tells me something. Bruce Dixon used to always tell me, or Glen Ford said, these are, every time we talk off air and have our pre-show conversations, which sometimes have nothing to do with the show at all. It's just me and him bitching about life and this thing we call politics. And of course, Touré, Cedric, Adolph, I am a beneficiary of this laundry list of intelligent people, and I'm just a sponge.
Jason is more than a sponge, man. Jason created a vehicle for us to come together and communicate to all of you. You are a conduit. You're more than a sponge, brother.
I'll take conduit, but I like sponge. But the new video essay is supposed to be up today on Zero Books. It is the introduction, or part 1 to, I think it's going to be a 4 or 5 part series on Huey Newton and the Black Colony, kind of dispelling, or I think it's called Huey Newton and the End of the Black Colony. So we're going to be kind of deconstructing the myth of the Black Colony. I might try to add a little bit. I'm not done with it yet, so I might try to add a little bit of Donald Harris's take in there somewhere. Also, in addition to the Mau Mau Hour that we're going to be doing every month, by the time this happens next month, the phone system should be up, so Pascal will be able to take calls. That'll be fun. Can't yawn on air.
No pressure.
Never. We're also adding a Wednesday of shows when I come back from vacation in September. You're not going to be on the Wednesday show, the foreign policy thing with like Cuba and.
I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet. I don't know.
I think we should all just walk away for a day. And then more movie night. I have an idea, and I'm going to run it by Pascal before I call out what the next movie night's going to be. But what else are we adding? And then when we hit 1,000 patrons, we're going to do a live show somewhere in California. Have a spot staked out. I was advised, keep it quiet. Live show. We're talking about flying Pascal out and some other friends of show. If I tell you too many names, and you'll know exactly where we're talking about. But we probably won't hit 1,000 patrons this year, maybe this year. But we're talking like end of the year, beginning of the new year, depending on how this COVID shit looks. Right now in California, it looks kind of frightening. We got mask mandates inside. And then Pascal is in Florida, where I'm terrified of Florida.
It's crazy out here, man.
Between alligators and rednecks, COVID is a whole new dimension to be frightened in Florida.
True that.
But it's been a dark day. Of course, the great Glen Ford, Dusty Hill from ZZ Top, passed away today as well. Bass player, and then Joey Jordison, drummer of Slipknot, died yesterday. So it's been an insane, dark week. So I'm hoping things get better. I'm in Florida with 2 autoimmune illnesses. Access Audio, I feel for you if you're in Florida with 2 autoimmune illnesses. You must just stay inside like Pascal. Oh, you started again for masking inside, devoid reality. A friend of mine that lives in Riverside, California, which is outside of LA County, his son failed 2 classes and had to go to summer school, but summer school was indoors. It was in and he said his son got A's. He said he was going to school, changed everything for his kid. But I think they're going back to remote learning. Wow. Everybody in your place is an adult, right, Pascal? There's no children around.
Yeah, I'm not dealing with any kids here.
So it's this COVID shit is insane, and I'm still frightened to see what's going to happen with what's going to happen if, because the CDC has brought down this whole, hey, you need to wear masks inside now. Hopefully that causes the administration to not try to lift this very, very tepid moratorium on evictions.
Yeah, that's another subject. It's a whole other subject.
No, and that's another thing I'm like really, really frightened about is we're already seeing people get evicted, but not at the numbers that we could see. If it's like, all right, everything's safe now, fuck it. So, knock on wood. Well, we've been here for an hour. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing before I take us out?
Rest in peace, Glen Ford, Bruce Dixon, and long live Black Agenda Report.
Before we go, keep talking, Pascal.
Just keep talking. Listen, you see how he does that? Just keep talking. I actually want to give condolences to the Black Agenda Report staff and the Ford family, as well as Margaret Kimberly, Danny Haifong, Ajama Baraka, and the rest of my colleagues at Black Agenda Report for the loss of our friend, mentor, editor, Bruce Glen Ford. And what do you got? What are you working on there?
I'm going to take us out with Glen Ford shitting all over Barack Obama. This is actually a really good episode of Chris Hedges' show, because Chris Hedges just kind of moves out the way and lets Glen Ford do his thing. So let's remember the man doing what he did best, shitting all over neoliberals.
Welcome to On Contact. Today we discuss the legacy of Barack Obama with the executive editor of the Black Agenda Report, Glen Ford.
The ascension of Barack Obama, the first black president, that historical skepticism among black folks, skepticism about power and the uses of power and the intentions and motives of people in power was weakened.
On Contact with Chris Hedges. The legacy of Barack Obama, as the executive editor of the Black Agenda Report, Glen Ford has pointed out, has been the near total collapse of the left. Obama for 8 years diligently served the interests of Wall Street and the war industry. His assault on civil liberties with the drawing up of kill lists that included U.S. citizens, misuse of the Espionage Act to prosecute government whistleblowers, passage of Section 1021 of the National Defense Authorization Act to empower the military to act in a time of crisis as a domestic police force, and failure to protect our privacy after the revelations of Edward Snowden, has furthered the assaults begun by George W. Bush. Obama oversaw the largest transference of wealth upwards to the 1% in American history. He championed charter schools and did not reform our monstrous system of mass incarceration and failed court system. Obama to push through his disastrous for-profit healthcare system, the equivalent of the bank bailout bill for the pharmaceutical and insurance industries, crushed the single-payer movement. He not only smashed the left, Ford writes, he humiliated it. RT correspondent Anya Parampel looks at some of the darker decisions of the Obama presidency.
President Barack Obama's 8 years are up. Running on hope and change, many hoped his presidency would usher in a progressive revolution. Instead, they got disappointment. One of the disillusioned is academic and activist Cornel West, who recently declared the Obama era, quote, may have been our last chance to break from our neoliberal soulcraft. Obama's first action as president was to sign an executive order demanding the closure of the Guantanamo Bay prison camp. 8 years later, there are 196 fewer detainees than when he took office, but the facility still stands. It will soon be under the control of Donald Trump, who has said he will not only keep it open, but will, quote, load it up with some bad dudes. President Obama also chose not to prosecute architects of the Bush administration's torture program. So while Obama signed an executive order banning torture, there's nothing stopping the next Secretary of Defense from bringing the practice back. Prosecuting bankers who caused the financial collapse of 2008 wasn't necessary in Obama's eyes either. Perhaps that's because he riddled his cabinet with pals of Wall Street, the same ones he voted to bail out with taxpayer money as senator. When Occupy Wall Street demonstrations exploded nationally in 2011, Obama described the protests by jobless, desperate Americans demanding Wall Street reforms and a future as similar to those of the Tea Party, the right-wing movement which characterized Obama as the Antichrist. Similarly, when Black Lives Matter erupted over the impunity of police who kill unarmed black men and women, Obama urged, quote, mutual respect and labeled Baltimore protesters who rose up in their city as thugs and criminals. When it comes to foreign policy, he expanded President Bush's secret, unaccountable drone warfare program outside of war zones. The administration claims it has killed up to 116 civilians across 3 countries. The Bureau for Investigative Journalism tallies that it's more than 7 times that. The administration claims it has the right to wage war on half the globe under the authorization of the use of military force and asserts it has the right to kill Americans abroad without due process. Influenced by his hawkish Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, he oversaw the NATO bombing campaign in Libya, which led to the murder of the country's leader, Muammar Gaddafi. Obama himself has said the intervention didn't work, as the country has dissolved into an ISIS death chamber. Obama handed Israel a $38 billion military aid package, the largest in history. That was despite Israel's 51-day war against Gaza, which left 2,000 Palestinians, including 500 children, dead, and the tiny strip utterly destroyed in 2014.
Yes, we did. Yes, we can.
Thank you, Anya. Glen Ford, the executive editor of the Black Agenda Report and the host of Black Agenda Radio, is one of the most fearless and important social critics in the country. He, along with a handful of great black intellectuals, including Cornel West, Bell Hooks, and James Cone, keep alive the black prophetic tradition, the most important intellectual tradition in American history. His ruthless honesty about the Obama administration has made him many enemies, especially among the black bourgeoisie. But he has proven to be as prescient as he is courageous. Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks for having me.
So let's look at the 8 years of Barack Obama, our first black president. What has that meant for African Americans?
Well, it means that a black person has grabbed the brass ring or the golden ring, and we've now had 8 years of experience of what that means or does not mean in terms of black America. It's a lesson that was learned at great cost, although I suppose it's a lesson that had to be learned. I'm speaking of for black people to understand the, some of the futilities involved in this duopoly electoral system, which actually selected the black man that we then celebrated having assumed that office.
Has that been a negative? I mean, I've heard you speak about how it's actually damaged the integrity of the African American community vis-a-vis empire and other issues?
Well, sure it has. Black folks are not geniuses. There are no genius people. People are all the same. But we did have one advantage in terms of dealing with this merciless capitalist system and its imperial policy. And that is that our history conditioned us to look with skepticism at power, to not trust whatever power said, to not believe what people in power said, because people in power had always lied about us, and we knew that they would lie about other people, especially people of color. And we knew that people in power in the United States were up to no good with their military and their security forces because of the way they treated us. So we were skeptical about U.S. military adventures abroad. And all of the polls since they've been tracking black folks as a group have shown that Black America is the most opposed to U.S. military adventures abroad and the most left-leaning in terms of domestic bread and butter issues. That's a product of our history. But with the ascension of Barack Obama, the first black president, that historical skepticism among black folks, skepticism about power and the uses of power and the intentions and motives of people in power was weakened. And so we saw in 2013, when President Obama was threatening to do an airstrike against Syria, a poll taken about 2 days before he called off that airstrike showed for the first time in history that more black folks, that is a greater proportion of black folks, were in favor of an airstrike against Syria than white people. Now, only a minority of people of all races favored an airstrike against Syria in late August of 2013. But still, more black folks favored than white people. And that had never occurred. So we can see from that and other kinds of evidences that the skepticism that has been part of our progressiveness has been worn away just by virtue of having a black man and his family in the White House.
Cornel West calls him a black mascot for Wall Street. Is that how you would sum up his 8 years?
Well, they're all mascots for Wall Street, and he is black, so yes, commonsensically, he is correct.
What do you think that the policies that he has furthered, austerity, cuts, school closings, et cetera, the inability to deal with mass incarceration, violent crime in places like Chicago, yet of course he goes off to Newtown. It doesn't match his rhetoric. His rhetoric is one of compassion, concern. What has been the consequences of that within the black community? Obama
rhetoric is masterful and really is worth a program in itself, and maybe some linguists should study it. It's classic. He will write the first paragraph of a speech directed at his base, which of course includes black folks, full of buzzwords that people associate with progressive politics. And the second paragraph directly following that actually negates the first paragraph. That's the real message, which is directed at his masters, the people he serves at Wall Street, assuring them that I don't really mean it. It's really masterful, and he uses the same formula all the time. President Obama came in with a grand plan. That grand plan included, of course, the grand bargain that he sought to reach with the Republicans for years, and only failed in reaching this grand bargain of austerity with the Republicans because the deep racism in that party and their own institutional imperatives prevented them from agreeing to a grand bargain that was totally in line with their politics. But he came in fact, 2 weeks before he took the oath of office, he told the New York Times and the Washington Post's editorial board that entitlements, meaning Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and all of those programs that progressives hold dear, that those programs would be on the chopping block in his administration. So this was his grand plan. First, to secure the drug industry and, of course, the insurance industry and their position in the money stream by passing his Obamacare bill, that is to eliminate the threat of single payer, and then move on directly to an austerity domestic policy, while at the same time opening up new fronts in the international imperial war sphere and introducing the Obama doctrine of humanitarian military intervention. So he had a grand scheme, partially thwarted by the Republicans themselves due to their racism and their imperative in terms of white supremacy being their organizing principle, and how difficult it is even to make peace with a complacent and cooperative black Democrat.
Would you grant that having a black family in the White House has positive symbolic value for African Americans?
I think it is something that we had to go through in order to remove the illusions of what it means to have a black person at the head of a reigning or ruling national party. It is a very painful lesson, but one that we had to experience. There are two currents in black political thought and action that have been there ever since there has been a black polity in the United States. One is self-determinationist, a politics that is progressive, that seeks to transform the world around us, which inevitably means transforming the world for white folks as well, and one that is representationist, that does not seek transformation of society, but only wants to make sure that black people are represented at all levels of the power structure, but is quite comfortable with the power structure. That representationist tendency was fulfilled totally with the election of the first black president.
And we'll come back to that. When we come back, we'll have more from Glen Ford, executive editor of the Black Agenda Report.
All right. Thank you, guys. If you want to watch the rest of that, I put a link in the description, or not in the description. I put a link in the chat for that episode of On Contact with Chris Hedges. It's on RT's YouTube channel. Chris Hedges does not have his own YouTube channel. And I'm going to shut this down and get to work on tomorrow's show. Thank you, guys, from the bottom of my heart, and of course Pascal's. We appreciate you guys for hanging out with us. On a side note, I saw people were asking questions about shirts on Patreon. If you send me your address, I can get a shirt out to you. Other than that, let's leave here with some cartoons. Peace.